and welcome to the Unknown Webcast. This is just a bit of a trigger warning for those who believe that words are more injurious than sticks and stones. I really am so conservative, I can't turn left even
Okay.
when I'm driving.
Vouch
In
for that.
addition to giving trigger warnings to our viewers, Ron Hensel and I both drink coffee for your protection.
Yes, we do.
This week, author Trent Blake is joining us today as we consider Christianity. My name is Don Vino. I'm president of Midwest Christian Outreach Inc. in Wonder Lake, Illinois, which produces the Unknown Webcast. And our senior researcher is Ron Hensel, who will
Still,
introduce the sponsors of today's webcast. And here is Ronnie Baby.
greetings from sunny Florida, where the palm tree came out, saw its shadow, and now we have 12 more months of summer. Our sponsor for this edition of the Unknown Webcast is My Bible, guaranteed the most comfortable Bible you'll ever own. My Bible. Our regular legal disclaimer, our guest on today's webcast, insert name here, that would be Trent Blake, has no connection whatsoever to any of the satirical content of the Unknown Webcast, hereafter known as the Webcast, although we probably will not mention it again. This satirical content includes any and all commercials, end credits, puns, smart remarks, or anything else that might fall into the definition of satire. In the meantime, Midwest Christian Outreach Inc. bears no liability for or responsibility for anyone's opinions regarding this satirical content. Our regular announcements notice. The opinions expressed on this webcast are ours and should be yours too. If you enjoy it or if it annoys you and you want to inflict it on someone else to ensure your continued access, please go to midwestoutreach.org, click the yellow donate button, and contribute as you feel led. And as you do, never fear. This webcast is Y2K compliant. And don't forget to subscribe to us on your favorite video channels. And now we introduce our special guest, Trent Blake. Okay.
Uh-oh.
Oh, there it is. I had to say it really loud to wake up the audience. So I need to say it louder next time. Okay, you can go back to sleep now. Okay. So
Okay.
yeah.
So now we're here. Trent was recommended to us by a friend, Pastor David Van Beber.
He's
And
our only friend, isn't he?
I'm sorry?
He's our only friend, isn't he?
Well, I have to pay for him to be my friend too. He's like one of those rent a friends. So, but he was very excited about the book that Trent has written and is now published, which I will bring up the title here. How do we? Oh yeah, here's how we do that. I always get confused because doing the video is really different than doing the PowerPoint. But that is what that looks like. Consider Christianity.
Yes.
Using evidence to examine the religion of Jesus. Oh, that's interesting. So, what was the religion of Jesus? Let's start there, or is this going to be an embarrassing question?
I hope we thought this through here.
Yeah. So the religion of Jesus, basically Christianity. That's where we got it all. That's where it all came from. Jesus, the founder of the Christian faith.
Are you sure that wasn't Paul? And he kind of changed what Jesus gave us.
Yeah, definitely not Paul. Paul was very helpful and definitely one of the apostles, but Jesus was absolute Son of God, founder of our faith.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
Oh.
Okay. So I noticed when I was kind of looking online at it, and you were kind enough to send us a PDF of the book, that it says 10 and up. Now, is that 10 people and more should read it at once, or is that an age?
I thought it was a size.
I mean, yeah, I mean, we can totally do 10 people at once. I mean, if we can all get them to read at the same time and then we just make it really loud and everyone can hear it. But no, it's just basically asked, is this for kids? And I was like, sure, it's for kids. Why not? And then they were just like, put an age group. I'm like, yeah, 10 years old. That sounds great. And so that's where that all came from. So I'm sure a 9-year-old would be able to understand it.
Well, here's why I ask. It's kind of important because we, as you know, we deal a lot with apologetics. We're missionaries to cults and non-Christian religions. So for me, apologetics is an essential tool in my toolbox of sharing the gospel. Unfortunately, many of the really good books on apologetics are geared to freshman college, maybe eighth,
Yeah.
high school. But I find most of them are just sort of out of the experience range, maybe vocabulary range.
Developmental. Yeah.
Yeah, developmental range. So where do you think that this fits in kind of the reading level scale?
Yeah, absolutely. So I designed this book specifically with your standard lay level, maybe went to high school a long time ago, or is in high school right now, or maybe in middle school type of age group. So it's very down to earth, basic, the way people actually talk. In fact, the way I designed the book, there's a few purposeful grammatical, like technical, like errors because I'm trying to make it the way I would actually speak. So everything is normal conversation like you'd have at the bank, you'd have get to with your pizza delivery driver. Like it's going to be your normal everyday sort of conversation.
So sometimes you'll say things like "use guys."
Well, maybe not use guys, but things along the lines of just, hey, how you doing? Like, hey, like, what's going on with this? Just very, very relaxed, normal kind of living room conversation.
Colloquialisms.
Yeah,
which
something
is
like that.
A word that it uses technical language to describe non-technical way of language.
And that was a very technical way of saying that.
Yeah, I know.
Well, technically he was correct. So,
yes, technically speaking.
So before we kind of get into the inner workings of the book, what prompted you to write it? I mean, you're a college student, university student. What is your major, by the way?
What's your angle?
So I'm right now going to Midwestern Baptist Theological Seminary. I'm getting my Master's of Theological Studies in Apologetics and Evangelism. And I think that both of those are very important that we put those together, just like what you guys are talking about. So that's kind of my angle. I originally started this book actually when I was in my undergrad, about halfway through that. And I was trying to find some kind of a short apologetics book I could give to a coworker to say, hey, here's why you should become a Christian. However, most of the time, the apologetics books I found were either massive, or they might have been the right size. They might have been accessible, but it was like, hey, Christian, here's how you defend your faith. And I'm not going to give to some atheist who does not like Christianity, hey, here's how you should defend your faith. And so I need something that would be accessible to them, that's short, it's concise, that is an easy everyday language, but at the same time is written to them and not to the Christian. So I was hard time trying to find something like that. I found a few that were close, but then they only covered like one little aspect of Christianity. And I was like, I need something that kind of gives like the main gist of like the big three of the existence of God, proving the resurrection of Jesus, and then proving that the Bible is historically reliable. And I couldn't find that. And so I was like, okay, I'll just write my own. And so that's where this all came from a few years later.
Well, yeah, that's important. I mean, a lot of obviously what I recommend, I try to because I deal with a lot of adults, things like I don't have enough faith to be an atheist.
Mm-hmm.
It's a really well done book, a lot of great information. It isn't short, and it's kind of about maybe your senior college level reading.
Mm-hmm.
So if you have somebody who's sort of new to apologetics, you have to start with saying, okay, here's what apologetics is.
Right.
Because it's a new word. And then you have to say, here's why it's important. You're kind of starting at a lower level to say, okay, here's sort of the big 4 issues that we need to talk about.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I have found that most of the time people are not going to read, giant size book, going on right here. They're going to want to read something like that's shorter, something like this size right here, kind of
right.
And even that, it's difficult to be able to get them to read because a lot of times people are kind of in this idea of, I just want to watch a 2-minute TikTok video and we're good to go. That's it. I'm just going to hear what someone has to say. And if I like it, I'll take it. If I don't like it, I'm just going to dismiss it. But starting out somewhere that's a little bit more, okay, it's beefier than just a 2-minute video. It kind of makes you think, it kind of really kind of digs into the issues, but isn't so long it's going to take them 20 years to read it. And so something along those lines.
Yeah, as you said, it occurs to me, and I know I've talked to others about this, but it just snapped into place, is we're really not in a reading culture so much anymore. His TikTok videos, his YouTube videos, and audiobooks. I love audiobooks.
Mhm.
But to actually sit down with a book in hand and read it is becoming less and less practiced by too many, unfortunately.
Mhm.
So that's good. So that's a good start.
Yeah, it's absolutely true. I mean, if you think about it, I just recently just heard a survey done, and the literacy rate in the United States is just plummeting. It's just going down crazy, ever since COVID. But even before that, just this idea of reading has become less and less important to people because, like, hey, I can just listen to something. Hey, I can just watch a video, and just attention span, same thing going down. Especially my generation, a lot younger, and people are not seeing the value of sitting down on paper and just reading. But I find that despite that, with these types of books, we can kind of get them back into this to really think through. This is something that's been edited, time after time after time after time, versus a 2-minute video where someone's just like, yeah, I'll just throw this together and it's my thoughts that I came up with today in the shower. There's a little bit more thought
Pretty
goes
much.
into this. Right. And so that way, I find books to be so much more helpful than even just little videos here and there, because you can really dig into the issues that people have really thought through, and on a more vetted type of situation.
Yeah.
Ron, do you happen to have the index up there?
I do. Can you hold on for just a second? I wasn't sure you were even going to ask me for it, but here we go. So,
and there it is.
there it is. So, first you cover the existence of God, and this stuff sounds hauntingly familiar. The cosmological argument, also known as the Star Trek versus Star Wars argument, I think.
Well, not exactly, but yeah.
Go ahead.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that it's important, as you see right here on the screen, that the three big areas of Christianity, you have the existence of God. At the end of the day, if God doesn't exist, there can't be, Jesus rising from the dead. That doesn't happen. For supernatural things to happen, for heaven and hell, for any of that, there has to be some sort of a God to be able to ground that. And so what we're doing right here in this first section is saying, hey, here's some evidences. Here's some reasons why you, as a secular person, as someone who has no love for Christianity, who is maybe even hostile to Christianity, why you should believe that an all-powerful creator of the universe exists. So things like cosmological argument, that's the argument that basically says that everything that begins to exist has to have a cause. Well, the universe began to exist. Therefore, the universe has to have a cause. Same thing with teleological, moral desire. These are kind of different arguments that kind of push behind that true reality that just comes from what we see around us.
Some people in my generation, when they hear cosmological argument, they picture Carl Sagan standing on the white cliffs of Dover saying, the cosmos is all that is, was, and ever will be. So, but we're not saying that. We're saying,
and we are stardust.
And we are all for billions and billions of years. Star stuff. He said star stuff.
Yeah,
star stuff, right?
The song Woodstock says we're stardust. He made it star.
Oh, okay.
Stuff.
Oh, I get that.
Yeah.
I got my cosmology mixed up between
with your
Carl
rock
Sagan
and roll,
and rock and roll. That happens to me a lot.
But the idea of the cosmological argument. So teleological. I mean, I happen to know that telos means goal. So things that appear to be designed with a purpose probably have one.
Right.
But how does that distinguish from? The cosmological argument is basically about beginnings, right?
Right.
Yeah. So, did you already cover that, or?
Yeah. So basically, the cosmological argument, like I said, is a syllogism, which says everything that begins to exist has a cause. The universe began to exist, therefore the universe has a cause. Well, you ask yourself, well, what's the universe? The universe, according to a scientific consensus today, and obviously we got to take it with a grain of salt, but hey, if this is your secular world's typically going to see scientists as going to be like your number one authorities in this area. So, hey, let's just take it with a grain of salt. Let's see what it says. Well, scientists say that the universe is the entirety of three things: time, space, and matter. Well, logic tells us that nothing can cause itself. So that means that whatever this cause is couldn't have been made up of time, space, or matter. And interesting, we see that for cause and effect, for anything, any kind of physical thing to cause something, it has to be caused by something else. So what do you get when you have a timeless, spaceless, non-physical cause behind the whole universe that wasn't caused by something physical? Well, you have to have something that has free will, something that is a non-physical person. I mean, what I like to think about is this way: how can you have a light turn on? Well, you have a light turned on by flipping on a switch. Well, what caused that switch to turn on? At some point back, you have to have something that was uncaused in order to cause something to happen, whether it be a light, whether it be a microwave, anything. You have to have some ultimate cause behind that.
Mhm.
But the only thing that can actually cause something without being caused to by something else is a living being. So what do you call a living being that's powerful and wise enough to create the entire universe? I don't know about you, but I call that God. And I go into the book and I kind of illustrate it with this story that actually happened not too far away from where I lived, where this guy took an alligator and actually threw it into a Wendy's, like crazy Florida man stuff. Like it legit happened near where I lived. And so he throws this alligator into the Wendy's, and the question is, how did the alligator get there? Did the alligator just happen to be there for all of eternity? Well, that's unreasonable. That's ridiculous. Did the alligator just spontaneously show up there? Did the alligator levitate and come into the window itself? Well, no, it was thrown in there by something. Everything that happens has to be caused by something else, unless you come back to the first cause, and that first cause can't be caused. It can't be a physical thing. Therefore, it has to be a person that has free will that can create without some sort of cause behind it. And so that's kind of what I get into with the cosmological argument in the book.
When I was a kid, the Big Bang Theory was kind of new, sort of. And you still had physicists who believed in the steady state theory. There's also something called the pulsating universe theory. Both of those posited a universe that had no beginning.
Sure.
And I know that's not in fashion now, scientifically, but then we just commented a little bit earlier that so many people are illiterate today. I wonder how many people know it. I wonder how many people realize that. I mean, they've heard at least of the TV show, The Big Bang Theory.
Right.
And maybe some of them have gone even a little bit deeper to know that was named after the current reigning paradigm for the beginning of the universe. But so many, I don't know. I mean, we just had a lady on TV the other day who thought the eclipse was caused by climate change. So, I mean, you just got to wonder. And she's on TV. She's on The View. I mean, then we had another person on X who was saying, we hardly ever get earthquakes here in New Jersey. Climate change is real. It's like, what? It's like the scientific level of people today is so pitiful in many places. I just wonder how many people would be puzzled at the idea that you're saying, they might not come back and ask, well, how do you know the universe had a beginning?
Sure.
How do you really know that?
Yeah, absolutely. So there's a few different ways we can approach this. My favorite way is the more philosophical way. And the way you kind of think of it is, if you're trying to say the universe had no beginning, right? Let's just go with the whole steady state universe behind it, right? That's the idea, is the universe just always existed, kind of, it's been steady in the state that it's in, hence the name. It's been for all of eternity. But that doesn't really work in a universe that has time, because if you think about it, you never really have a point that can cause anything. Let's just say that you're going to have dominoes falling in a line, right? If you have one domino, that domino is caused by something else. Well, what caused that domino? Well, something else. And you have to keep going back, domino. But if you keep going back and there's never a starting domino to knock over, the dominoes can never get started. The dominoes can never cause something to happen. And so nothing could ever happen. So philosophically, it just doesn't work. But from a scientific standpoint, we see as well that the universe is expanding. And in fact, we see I'm sure you guys have heard of the Hubble telescope. And that's this, the significance of the Hubble telescope is it was named after a man who looked through the telescope and saw that the universe was expanding. Now, ask yourself, if the universe is expanding going forward in time, then the universe must be, if you look backwards, would be shrinking, going backwards. Well, shrinking to what? At some point, you have a point. Right. You can't go past a point. You can't shrink beyond what's smallest. And so for the universe to be expanding, that means that it had to have a starting point from which to expand from, which is that discovery, and discoveries like it is why that things like the steady state universe have completely failed. They flopped because it just does not work. And if, let's just say, okay, well, let's just ignore that fact that you need a beginning point. If the universe somehow without a beginning point kept expanding, at some point in the future, the universe would simply fizzle out into heat death.
Yeah.
There would be nothing left. Well, the question remains, if the universe has always been like this for gazillions of years, not billions, but gazillions of years, upon trillions, upon trillions, upon gazillions of years, the question is, why hasn't the universe already died from heat death? There would be no reason why it wouldn't have died now, but it would.
Yeah. Well, the steady state theory, of course, the idea is that new matter is always being created. And yeah, which of course that violates relativity,
Sure.
And then the pulsating universe theory is it only, and now this was only recently proven, that there's no way there's enough mass in the universe to pull it all back together again so that it can blow up again. So you have to kind of educate when you're presenting this evidence. You kind of have to educate the person, occasional person who you run into, who's just clueless about the science here.
Absolutely. And no, absolutely. I mean, even the idea of the pulsating universe, what's kind of like an accordion goes back and forth, forth. Even that, there was in 2003, three men. It's called it was Alexander Board. No, it was, I forget his first name. So it was Board,
Mo, Larry, and Curly. We'll just call them
right. Board, Guth, and Billington. They were able to definitively demonstrate in 2003 through what they called the Board, Guth, Billington theorem after their last names, and they showed definitively mathematically that even in an accordion type of universe, an expanding and subtracting, expanding and contracting universe, you still have to have a beginning, because even in that instance, the length of time for the expansion and contraction would change over time to the point where you have an instantaneous beginning at the very beginning, no matter what. Even there's another theory by Stephen Hawking that using weird mathematical formulas like imaginary time is just stuff that just would not work in reality. But even mathematically, you still have a point, a place, a plane where time would have to begin. And you have to ask yourself, why? How did this get here? Why is there something? Well,
I figured out, and I for a long time, you don't know this, but for a long time I was part-time working for a company that hauls mail for the post office, from the main post office to the post offices. And what I discovered while doing that is the post office actually works on imaginary time.
Right.
Yeah. And when you talk about imaginary time, I think of Woody Allen when he said, "What if everything is an illusion and nothing really exists?" In that case, I definitely overpaid for my carpet. But when you talk about purpose, you get into the teleological argument, and I like your Florida man alligator story is a really, really dumbed down version of William Paley's illustration. You probably know it, where what if you're a man walking in the woods and you come upon a watch, a pocket watch laying in the dirt, and you observe it and you see it has this very complex mechanism, and maybe you've never seen a pocket watch before, I don't know, but you see numbers on it, you see all these indications of some kind of this thing was made to do things. It has a purpose. It is complex, and this is back in the early 1800s. And to top it off, he's a Unitarian. He's not even even a theist, right? But he can figure this much out, that if something looks like it has a goal, then that means it was designed, and there must have been a designer.
Certainly.
Must have been a being behind it. Yeah. You wouldn't just assume this fell out of a tree, was produced by the tree, or something like that.
Absolutely. Yeah. The teleological argument is really interesting in that it doesn't actually talk about cause per se, but asks, okay, there seems to be some sort of a purpose behind this. There is looks like this has been designed. In fact, Richard Dawkins, in his book on biological evolution, says that biology is the study of things that look designed. And then he later makes a case to say, I know it looks that way, but it wasn't actually. We got to keep in mind that it wasn't actually designed. It's like, but it looks that way. So, but the interesting thing is,
who are you going to believe, me or your lying eyes?
Right, exactly. But the really interesting thing is that the chances of even just basic life showing up on our planet are astronomically small. Interesting things, certain things, and this is just taking the standard scientific, often very secular consensus on these things, saying, all right, let's just use your numbers. Let's use this. Let's assume the universe is so-and-so billion, 13.8 billion years old, or some are saying like 26.2 or something now. But let's just assume all of that. Let's take that at face value. What do you have? Well, you have certain things that are so astronomically unlikely happening all in conjunction according to their system. And you're like, how could this happen? Case in point, the cosmological constant. There are the chances of that happening, of that being in the right span of a range where life could exist at this range. Outside of that range, life could not exist because of just the chemical makeup of the universe just would not happen, right? The chances of that happening are so low, are so low that you have to actually have exponents to be able to show that how low this is.
Exponents of exponents. Kind of like the odds against the Chicago Cubs winning the World Series and Donald Trump being elected in the same year.
Right? But it's so much. So for case of point, for example, the odds of winning the lottery are like 1 in 10 to the 8th power, about, depending on the lottery, right? So 1 in 10 followed by 8 zeros. That's pretty low. And that's why a lot of your investor is not going to say, hey, you know what you got to do for retirement? Buy a bunch of lottery tickets. Like, it doesn't happen. It's just so ridiculously low, but it can happen, right? Did you know the chances of the cosmological constant being just right is 1 in 10 followed by, guess how many zeros? 120 zeros.
That's more than Google.
It's ridiculous.
I mean,
yeah.
Google is
that'd be Google.
10 to the 100th power. So, that's a big number. And the thing is, people hear that 120, they go, "Oh, but no, you don't understand. It's like 100. It's like a billion times a billion times a billion. I mean, you could go on and on. That's 100 zeros."
But it gets even worse. The atomic weak force, another constant, is another 1 in 10 to another 100 zeros. So that's not, you add them together to 220 zeros. That's 100 zeros. That massive number, Google, that times 1 in 10 to the 120th zeros. And you do that again. There's another one. You got the atomic weak force. You have the cosmological constant. But then you have this one that's crazy insane. It's the cosmic, is the low entropy condition of the early universe. This number is so astronomically large that it requires exponents of exponents.
Right.
I wrote it down in my book. It's close to, it's 1 in 10 to the 1,000,000,000, and just keeps going on and on and on and on. To put this into perspective, it's as if every zero were to put without exponents, if every zero were the size of a subatomic particle, and you were to try to write this on a paper at these microscopic levels, it would require more space than could be contained in over 1 billion universes.
Universes.
That's just to illustrate it. It's ridiculous.
People don't, and these are very helpful analogies. People don't even really understand how big a trillion is.
Right.
Okay, so an airplane propeller will spin at about.
Obviously, our senators don't understand how big a trillion is.
No. I mean, Ronald Reagan tried to explain it. He tried to explain it in his first address to the nation in 1981 when he said, if you were to take freshly printed $1 bills, and I worked in a bank, so I knew what freshly printed $1 bills. It's very, very compact. Because once you start handling bills, they actually take up more space when they're stacked. But $1 bills, very compact. If you were to stack 1 trillion of them, it would it would reach to the moon and back 1.5 times, or something like that. If an airplane propeller goes 3,000 RPMs, how long would it take to spin 1 trillion times? I believe it comes to 31,000 years. I mean, that's 1 trillion. If we paid back $1 trillion of the national debt at $3,000 a minute, it would take 31,000 years to pay back just 1 trillion of it. And we've got 34 trillion right now.
Yep.
So, there you go. Sweet dreams.
So I have one of our neighbors is an atheist. He's a really great guy.
Mhm.
Or let me rephrase that. He wants to claim to be an atheist, and we see each other a couple of times a week, usually doing different things. And I have told him, I said, You really aren't an atheist." And he said, "Of course I am." I go, "No. If you're honest, you can't be an atheist because an atheist claims to know something that you cannot know. You cannot know God
Mhm.
doesn't exist." Uh, I'm not saying it's a Christian God necessarily, but maybe there's a God out there. Or if he doesn't exist now, maybe he exists in the past. Or if he doesn't exist in
Mhm.
the past, maybe he'll exist in the future. Maybe he doesn't exist here, but he exists somewhere else in the universe. So, and you can't get there. So you can't really
Mhm.
know that God doesn't exist. So you really should opt for agnosticism. And you can be an agnostic, which says I don't really know anything, and that's
Mhm.
okay. I
Hmm.
happen to like to know stuff. And so what's interesting about him, though, is he's sort of more in the line of, say, a 1960s or 70s liberal. He's conservative
Mhm.
politically, but he's the
Sure.
kind of guy that we can disagree. We can have a great time arguing over the issues. We're going to have dinner together, which we do with Joy and him and myself. And we argue over this kind of stuff regularly and enjoy it thoroughly because
Mhm.
it's not personal. My goal, as yours is with your book, is to get to the point where he understands what the gospel is.
Sure.
And in the
Yeah.
process, I've discovered he isn't rejecting the faith because it doesn't make sense, but because his family was treated badly by the church he grew up in.
Hmm.
Mhm.
That's a different question. So, but some people just have a problem with the Bible because they don't like what it says. And we have a sponsor that addresses that very issue.
Yes, we do. So, how do we get the screen up? I already have it there. Do we just do this here?
Well, we can.
There we
There it
go.
is.
So, we all know that awkward feeling when someone in a Bible study says, I wish the Bible didn't have all those verses about hell. Or when you're having a couple's devotions and your spouse says, I'm just not comfortable with verses that teach a traditional view of marriage. Or when you're sitting in church and you're thinking, why do all the Bibles I read have to agree with what conservative pastors are teaching? That's why we're introducing My Bible. It's guaranteed the most comfortable Bible you'll ever own. We've spent literally minutes creating a way you can have the Bible that's perfect for you. You used to have to go down some dark back alley to get a Bible like this, but not anymore. Just write down all the places where you want to make your Bible more comfortable for you, and then email them to us or enter them into our handy online form. And the results speak for themselves. Yolanda from Portland says, now that I have my Bible, I never worry that my white male pastor sermons might actually be right. Ben from seminary says, my Bible gave me the confidence I needed to drop out of my Hebrew and Greek classes. And Renee from Madison says, every single one of my anti-capitalist, anti-police, and anti-social protest chants now comes from my Bible. When someone says an uncomfortable verse at, or throws an uncomfortable verse at you, now you can say, that's not in my Bible, only at mybible.cult. So everybody should have one. I have my Bible.
I'll take 6 of them.
Okay. One for each day of the week, and then you'll need you can take a day off on Sunday. I don't know what you're gonna do.
That's right.
Yeah.
Take a day off
Yeah,
on Sunday.
yeah. All right. So, okay. So the existence of God, cosmological argument, teleological argument. What do we have next? What is next on our
Moral argument.
Yep.
Yeah.
moral arguments? Why should we live any way at all? Now, this is kind of a fun one right today at this time because we have an interesting situation going on with our most popular, well-known atheist, and that is that they are identifying as Christian atheist
Mhm.
or cultural atheist. Dawkins just
Mhm.
actually came out with this statement the last week. Uh, a cultural atheist, cultural Christian.
Yep.
So he doesn't believe in God, but he believes we need to safeguard the Christian morality and ethics.
Yeah.
So what is it that you have for the young in age and the young in experience on the issue of morality?
Yeah, well, it really comes down to the question of why are things good and evil? At the end of the day, what reason do we have to say that, like the Muslims do in some fundamentalist Muslim countries, throw gay people off buildings? What reason do we have to say that's wrong? What reason do we have to say that stealing is wrong? What reason do we have to say that what the Nazis did in World War II was wrong? What reason do we have for that? What reason do we say that racism is wrong? What reason do we have for saying any of those things? The question is, what is your basis for moral right and wrong? And at the end of the day, for something to be morally grounding, to be something, for something to be the reason why there is a moral right and wrong, is for it to have authority over all humanity, something that actually gets to tell us what to do. Because if you think about it, if there's no authority, then why is morality anything more than a suggestion, right? Like if I say, hey, don't kill people, hey, don't be a racist, am I just saying, hey, here's a suggestion, don't do this, but it's no big deal if you don't want to do that? Well, no, we're saying something is absolutely wrong and you're not supposed to be doing this. Well, why? Because the authority, something that takes charge over you, is telling you to do this and you are obligated to obey it, right? Well, it has to be authoritative. Second thing, it has to be transcendent. In other words, it has to exist across at least all of humanity. Otherwise, let's just say if I were the authority, right? The moment I die or the moment before I existed, there would be no morality. And we know that morality, it's always been wrong to be a racist. It's always been wrong to kill people. It's always been wrong. Like it's always been wrong to do evil things, to throw people off buildings for no
Well,
reason.
okay. I
Right.
want to stop you there 1 second because this is important.
Yeah.
Has it always been wrong in all cultures to do those things?
Sure. So,
Here's why I asked that. If we read, for example, Dominion by atheist Tom Holland, he does an excellent job. And one of the things that he points out, in fact, he just did it recently in a online presentation and interview,
yeah.
as he's dealing with the Greco-Roman world. His point is that none of these things that we consider wrong were wrong in that culture. All that
Sure.
mattered was the male dominant power and whatever it was they did, swagger, whatever. Women were not relevant. Children were not relevant.
Right.
You purpose
Well,
to have sex with any and
so,
everyone around.
well,
Right.
I don't know if I agree with Tom Holland.
Yeah.
And the reason I don't is because of what Paul says in Romans chapter 2, that God's law is written on the hearts of even the Gentiles.
It is, but that isn't how they behaved.
No, I
Sure.
agree, but they know. And Paul's point is really a follow-up to what he said at the end of Romans 1. Even though they know that those who practice these things are worthy of death, they not only do them, they encourage others to do likewise. So there's something down inside. It does come out in the culture eventually. You can't contain it. Like, for instance, when the Roman, I forget, there's a Roman who was in some way responsible for what the Romans did to Carthage. I don't know if you're familiar, but the Romans got kind of sick and tired of fighting the Carthaginians so many times that they decided to put an end to it once and for all. And they went down, and not only did they destroy Carthage, but in all of the farmland around, they sowed the fields with salt, so nothing could grow there. And the guilt, I mean, it seemed perfectly justified at the time. I mean, the Carthaginians, had Hannibal with the elephants, you had all this kind of stuff going on. It's like, we're tired of you guys. We're going to just, and the cultural guilt that was felt after that. One of the, what was the story? One of the guys who did it burned his hands. I forget. I read about it a long time ago because he felt so guilty and he wanted to appease the gods for what he had done to the Carthaginians. And so there's, we suppress the truth and unrighteousness. And, and when our culture becomes particularly decadent, then you start to look at the culture and say, well, it doesn't look like they have any sense at all of right and wrong. No, they do. And it'll come out. You can't keep it contained, I would say.
Sure. And what I would say is this argument works even if no one agrees, even if no one, let's just say the Nazis were the ones in charge for the past 4,000 years.
Yeah.
And they're like, yeah, killing people in concentration camps, no problem. That doesn't, what I'm not arguing is people have always recognized what is right. But we
Right.
would all agree that even if the Nazis had won World War II, even if all this were to happen and the consensus of the world, even not just their culture, but the whole world were to say, yes, these things are okay, it would still be wrong to gas people because of their
Well,
ethnic
and
background.
when you look at the rationale that Hitler and the Nazis used, it's really based on the Ten Commandments. I mean, what that sounds weird to say, but what they were accusing the Jews of doing was violating the Ten Commandments against the Germans.
Sure.
And they were, of course, making up all these ridiculous accusations,
Right.
you know, and but doing things that Europeans had been doing for hundreds of years. Okay, you know, the plague was really caused by the Jews poisoning the wells of Europe.
Right.
So therefore, now we have legitimate reason because they're violating God's law against us. And
Sure.
every time you do this, you're not only vilifying your opponents, but if you do it long enough and hard enough, as Hitler did, you're dehumanizing your opponents. And he actually explicitly dehumanized them, calling them parasites and subhumans. So, you know, oddly enough, it's a perversion and a twisting of the morality, innate morality that God put inside of us.
You're absolutely right. I mean, when you think through it, like even in the time when the global slave trade was a thing for so many hundreds of years, and you still have massive amounts of slavery happening, whether that be sex slavery or whether that be slavery for labor, even in other places outside the US, you have this idea that, yeah, it's okay to enslave people, not a big deal. And it wasn't until quite recently where we were like, hey, that's actually not a good thing. It's
well,
evil.
you know, a lot of people aren't aware of the history behind that. I mean, you know, the question that was the Spaniards were actually wrestling with, they actually had a theological conference over the question of whether the Native Americans were human.
Right.
And it was a split decision. They never encountered people like this before. And when the Native Americans didn't do so well in the gold and silver mines that the Spaniards were digging, and they didn't, the Roman Catholic priest who was concerned about the souls of these, you know, natives, he was upset that many of them were resisting the gospel because of the enslavement. He said, well, you know, we have these people over in Africa who were captured as prisoners of war, and in the current thinking there, if you were captured as a prisoner of war, that made you fair game to be enslaved. So they were African slaves, and so they had this kind of what we would call a whack system, you know, really twisted system of justifying it. But then, you know, so they start importing African slaves, and the priest then sees the results of that, and he wishes he'd never made the suggestion, you know. But that comes, it's like over time, it's like people just knew that slavery was wrong. They just kept finding ways of justifying it, and then their consciences suffered and culture suffered.
Right.
That's absolutely true. I mean, at the end of the day, people do have that conscience that God has given to them, and we suppress the truth. But the point of this argument is, even if that were not the case, we know that it's wrong. And so what they did for it, the consensus of the society doesn't determine what's right or wrong. At the end of the day, even if people said, yeah, segregation, separate but equal, it's all fine. And we're just like, yeah, that's not right. We can't just say at the time society said it was fine. And if morality were determined by society or by the world culture or by any of these things, then a lot of things like slavery, like segregation and going on before with the civil rights movement, having to spring up out of that, all of these things that society said was right, they would be right. And yet, because we know that even cultures can make these consensuses, even with all of that, there's still some overarching authority that says, no, that's not what's right. What's right is what I have to say. What's right is my commands. And that's the only way you can come to these conclusions that the world was wrong at some point.
Well, the world that determines, the world that ultimately determines for itself what is right and wrong is the world of 1984, and
Right.
Animal Farm. That's
Right.
and you start to see. I mean, it's like, well, how does it begin? We have, for as long as we've always been at war with Eurasia, when in fact everybody knows we haven't always been at war with Eurasia. It's just the
Mhm.
latest truth from the Ministry of Truth.
Yep.
So
No, absolutely. Yeah, we
yeah.
need some higher objective standard, which is at the end of the day, the standard has to be transcendent, authoritative, and the only things that can be authoritative are personal beings. And for anyone that makes a difference, say, okay, well, tell me how a chair can be an authority over you. Tell me how a keyboard can be an authority over you. The only things
Yeah.
that we have ever
Right.
seen that are
Right.
authoritative are persons. So what do you have? A transcendent authoritative person? That's the definition of God.
Yeah,
And so once
every time
again, God
somebody
is the
says, "What is
destination for morality.
every time somebody says, "What's the universe trying to tell you?" It's like,
Yeah.
well,
The
I think it's
universe a
something like
person?
the heavens declare the glory of God. Isn't that what it's trying to tell me?
Yeah, right? Mm,
Yeah.
certainly.
Okay. So what is next? I see the
Oh, I'm sorry. I blocked.
index is gone. That's okay.
I was setting up. I'm sorry. Let me
No
turn that
worries.
off. There we go. So what's next is, go ahead. We are
Yeah, so the
desire
next
argument.
thing, yeah, desire. So I'll go briefly over this one, but basically this says, hey, it's C.S. Lewis's argument, basically repackaged and kind of fleshed out. But the idea is, if I find within me desires that this world can't satisfy, I must have been made for something greater. I must have been made for another world. Or as some people have said, it's like a God-sized hole in our heart that only God can fill. And so at the end of the day, there are certain things that we desire, that we need, that are only fulfilled if God exists. For example, ultimate purpose. If there's no God, there's no afterlife. At the end of the day, when the universe goes heat dead, every single thing that we do in life is meaningless. If at the end of the day, God does not exist, then there is no right and wrong, ultimately, just our own subjective preferences. There's no grounding for that, like we talked about with the moral argument. If at the end of the day that there's no purpose behind this universe, there's no telos, well, then there's no telos for us either. If at the end of the day there's no safety and security, there's no ultimate love that we can have and holding on to, and we're not truly fully loved, then we can't have those things that we deeply desire. And sure, someone could say, well, boo-hoo, just that's life, suck it up. But at the end of the day, if we all have this desire within us,
Yeah.
we have to ask why. It's not a hard evidence for God's existence, like the cosmological, moral, or teleological, but it's an intriguing question. And the point behind this argument is to basically to say, this is something at least you should consider. If it's even possible that there is some fulfillment for all these desires that you have within you, then isn't that something worth looking into?
Yeah.
At the end of the day, Christians believe that God made us to have joy in him, to delight
Yeah.
in him. And if that's even possible, we should really take a look at that.
This is possibly, of the first four we're looking at here, or the basic four arguments, it's probably the most personal, in the sense of the first three, you're appealing to something outside of the person.
Right.
This one, you're now going inside the person's heart. And it's almost like you have to kind of sneak up on people with this one.
Yeah.
Particularly if they're resistant, you have to, because they can always deny what's really going on in their hearts, because they don't want you to know that they're having any kind of struggle. And that's fine. They don't have to come clean with you. You can plant a seed, and it can. But the way I like to. I've been doing a lot of thinking lately about. This is like when we were kids. When I was a kid, Don, you were not far. You were a little bit older than I was.
Back in the olden days.
Back in the days. Well, I was thinking about Woodstock, and think about the chorus of Woodstock. We are stardust, we're golden, we're caught in the devil's bargain, and we've got to get ourselves where?
Back to the garden.
Back to the garden. And that Woodstock, of course, was in August of '69. The February of '69, there was a Star Trek episode. And I was a big Trekkie, original series Trekkie.
Yeah, loved it.
And it was called The Way to Eden. So what Woodstock was tapping in on, and what Star Trek was highlighting, was in the culture big time. I mean, especially the youth culture, the Eden that we've lost. Okay, it's like something is wrong. Okay, so this is the desire argument. You know, we want things to be better than they are, right? Could you repeat that desire argument again so that I don't mangle it?
Yeah, absolutely. It's based off of C.S. Lewis's argument. The idea is that if there is within us something in this, there's so many things in this world that can't satisfy it, the
Right.
desires that we were all made with. We were made for another world. That's the
And
most
it's like
reasonable thing.
in the world of '69 was Vietnam. It was the wake of the King and Kennedy assassinations in '68. It was the Manson murders of '68. We didn't know it yet, or maybe we did. Was that the year that the My Lai massacre news came out, or was it '70? I forget. I mean, it was
and then a couple of years after that, you had the Kent State massacre.
1970, Kent State.
Yeah.
So the world just, I mean, I can remember my grandparents, like every time they open a newspaper, it's like, what is going on? You know, they were like in their 50s and 60s, you know, so they were like, you know, they approached it a little bit differently. The kids, the young people were really like, they wanted to get back to Eden and they thought we could do it, you know, but that desire, in other words, if you were to approach it in an apologetics posture of Lewis, you know, was talking about, and by the way, that around that time, my oldest cousin, he's a second cousin, but I've got all these passels of cousins, you know, in the Chicago area. He started reading C.S. Lewis's Mere Christianity.
Yeah.
I don't know that I don't think he ever became a Christian, but he was, you know, not satisfied with the religion he was getting at home. And C.S. Lewis was speaking to a lot of young people around that year, but the desire for, well, you know, for Eden, you know, the desire, and we were made for a better world than this.
Right.
We've got to get ourselves back to the garden. Yeah. Why?
Yeah.
Why are we all like this? Even my grandparents who didn't talk about Eden, I mean, for them, it's like, oh, I can't wait till I die now, you know, so I can be in heaven or something. But for young people who had no religion, pretty much, they figured, well, a lot of them were, I'm going to camp out on the land. I'm going to get my soul free. That's the beginning of Woodstock, right? So, yeah.
Absolutely.
Well, I want to look at the title of your book one more time here while we're continuing on, which is Consider Christianity, Trent Blake, and you can get that on Amazon for sure. Age group considerations, really teenagers and adults, who are unfamiliar with these topics. I think it would be helpful for them. Now, is there you have a website, right? Which we have included in below. What is that? Just so those who wonder.
So my website, baselinechristianity.com, like baseline, like your kind of lie detector test, you have that baseline, the starting point. So baseline Christianity, the basics, is baselinechristianity.com. The whole point of this is for it to be a resource library that's got some of the best Christian resources out there from other people. So things like, hey, let's get the best people on the resurrection. Let's get some videos from them. Or, hey, let's get the best people on the existence of God. Let's get some books from them. Or, hey, and basically, where's some good Christian colleges that I would recommend. So kind of going towards that. It's a collection of resources so that people can better deepen and defend their faith. And so that's the point behind it. It's called Baseline Christianity. Everything except for my book is free, and my book is basically just print cost. And so anyone is more than welcome to take that. That is designed to help the church as much as possible to deepen and defend their faith.
Well, and that is very important, as you know, and Ron and I both know. I mean, just the question of the resurrection. I flabbergasted at how many who are involved in, you know, evangelical churches even, that are not aware that the resurrection was physical. It was the physical body that came out of the tomb. It surprises me. And the church I just spoke at over the weekend, I went through a number of statistics that were just shocking to them. That under 20% of evangelicals do not
Mm,
have a biblical worldview. So,
certainly, yeah,
so
yeah,
what you're
absolutely. And
right? Go ahead.
I'm sorry, I keep interrupting you right when you're going. But yeah, I think that generally, we didn't have time to be able to go through the resurrection today, but I'm very, very impressed by the evidence that there is in history for the resurrection of Jesus. It is truly overwhelming. Just things like the biblical scholars, people that are not Christians, saying, "Hey, listen, this stuff. It's pretty clear that Jesus actually died. And it's pretty clear that a lot of people really believe they saw him afterwards. How do you explain this?" And then there's many different theories that people put out there, but at the end of the day, the resurrection is the best evidence. And highly recommend you go into my website. There's a lot of free resources out there. You can get my book for very inexpensive. It's $7 on Amazon, and we can go through topics like the resurrection, historical reliability of the Bible as well.
Yeah, right. Gary Habermas is probably one of the leading experts on that whole thing.
Yeah.
He's just done some great work on it, and he points out, as you just mentioned, that pretty much all scholars, liberal, conservative, doesn't matter. There's like 10 points that they agree on about that event. Even if they deny the resurrection actually occurred, they go, okay, those who followed him clearly believed he was resurrected. And they based everything they taught on that belief.
Yeah.
You can't really get away from that. Even let me think of it. Bart Ehrman agrees that that is what they believe.
Yeah.
Now, if they believed it that strongly enough that they actually believed it was true, that would and died for it, that would demonstrate they didn't invent it.
Yeah.
Right? Because you wouldn't
No,
believe
absolutely.
right, a lie that you knew was a lie. So,
yeah, I like to say that the difference between them and say like the 9/11 hijackers, for example, is the hijackers and other people that like today, even me, we believe what we were taught. We believe what we have researched and our conclusions, but we weren't eyewitnesses of what happened to them. They believe what they saw. Sincerely believing, sincerely trusting, and sincerely seeing are two very, very different things. And they are able to show definitively they have seen this by the fact they're willing to back it up with their very lives.
Right. All right. So, go to his website, that Baseline Christianity, right?
Baseline Christianity. Yep.
And there's pretty much, you said pretty much everything that's in the book is there. So you have to kind of go through the various topics and stuff, or pick up the book if you're like me. Pick up the book and just open and start reading it, and take your highlighter to highlight stuff. Now, what happens, Blake, if someone's reading your book and they're going, "Okay, I'm confused on this. Is there someone they can contact to say
so
I
my
have
website,
a question?"
Yeah, my website, Baseline Christianity, has a contact form. Anyone is more than welcome to reach out to me. Go straight to my email, and I'm like, all right, cool. We can always talk via email. I can always set up a phone call if necessary. Whatever is helpful, because I'm absolutely here to help answer any kind of questions that you might have on these issues.
Now, here's something I'm going to ask you. We've never asked a guest this before, but you might want to think about this for a moment. What if you had a small group of, I don't know, high schoolers out there in their youth group that said, we'd like to have maybe 3 or 4 weeks of meeting on a Wednesday evening or something online to go through these things with you. Is that something you'd be willing to do?
Yeah, absolutely. I've never done it before in that type of setting. I mean, I've definitely done small group with high schoolers and middle schoolers before, but not online. But that would definitely not be an issue, and I'd be more than open to do something like that.
Okay, good. That's good, because that's what they need, really. I think youth pastors have a difficult job, and part of it is just keeping them engaged. Sometimes they're not equipped really to teach on these things well, and so to have someone like yourself to say, we want to serve the church well, we are willing to do this to help your local youth group, I think that's a really powerful thing. So good.
Certainly.
Ron, would you care to walk us out of here?
Yeah, let's give credit to whom credit is due. Our resident cult leader profiler is Neil before me. Our wardrobe manager is See How It Fits You. Culinary services are provided by Chef Ham and Cheese. Our tinfoil hat provisioner is Just In Case. Jehovah's Witnesses coverage comes from Armageddon, and D. Opposer. Our Mormon Archives manager is Polygamus. Our Liberal Denominations Bureau Chief is Lucy Goosey. Our transgender issues coverage comes from Ben Hur. Special correspondent for cults based on the Hindenburg disaster and flying turkeys, OD Humanity. Our fact-checking supervisor is Joe Leg Pulling. Technical assistance comes through Murky Research. Legal advisors are at the law firm of Dewey, Cheatham & Howe. Our grievance resolution director is Giovanna Pisami. Our director of privacy assurance is Wiretapping. And original idea sourcing comes from Drew A. Blank. The Unknown Webcast is a production of Midwest Christian Outreach Inc. in cooperation with Emergency Manicure Productions, both of whom are solely responsible for this content, although you will never be able to prove that in a court of law.
Never happened.
We're still waiting for it to finally occur.
All right. Trent, thank you. Everyone else, we will see you next week.